Hello there. Today I'm taking a look at a Marlborough Chardonnay from New Zealand from a producer I'm always sort of slightly surprised isn't better known. So this is Isabel Estate's Marlborough Chardonnay 2019. So in fact, Isabel Estate is one of the older wineries in Marlborough. It sits in the Wairau Valley, sort of near Renwick, right at the sort of the heart of the original vine growing areas of Marlborough. And just to remind you, Marlborough was sitting at the top of New Zealand's North Island, sort of to the east coast, so an area that gets plentiful sunshine, where the rainfall is not as high as on the west coast. The estate was established in 1980 by Mike and Robin Tiller. As they tell the story, Mike, as a pilot flying in and out of Blenheim Airport, had seen frequently this one plot of land that, even when there were frosts in the neighbouring districts, was always free from frost. So he saw this as a favourable piece of land and acquired it. The name Isabel Estate is in honour of his mother. So planting began in 1980 with Chardonnay, and today Isabel Estate believe they have some of the oldest Chardonnay on original rootstocks in the Marlborough region. Now, although planting started in 1980 with Chardonnay and was followed by plantings of Pinot Noir, Riesling, Sauvignon Blanc and Pinot Gris, it wasn't until they produced their 1994 Pinot Noir that they actually started to produce their own wines. Now today the wines are entirely estate grown, estate made and estate bottled. They keep complete control over all the aspects of production. But presumably for that first 13 years or so, they were simply acting as growers and selling their fruit to other producers. Their aim is to dry farm, although they do occasionally use some supplementary irrigation if necessary. Now, the Wairau Valley's soils in general are old, stony, there are sandy loams, and actually the soils are frequently quite good at water retaining, and that's what you find here at Isabel Estate, where you've got gravels over a thin layer of quite dense clay, and so that stops water from soaking away and provides sufficient moisture for the vines to thrive. You have to remember that here the average rainfall is about 600 millimeters a year, so actually in some ways that's quite advantageous. It means that there is little need to spray because there's not that much humidity to promote the growth of fungal infections or anything like that. Particularly for the plot where the Chardonnay is planted, clays in the soil are calcium rich and there's a certain amount of limestone as well, and that's perceived as helping to give minerality to the wine. The southern border of the estate is the Omaka River, so again that moderates the climate and helps ensure that the water table remains fairly constant. Now the vineyards here are densely planted, probably twice as densely as is general in Marlborough. And the idea of this is to promote competition between the vines. And what they feel is that this produces smaller bunches and smaller berries, and therefore you're getting more concentrated fruit. The vineyards are all farmed sustainably. They use quite a lot of compost in place of synthetic fertilizers. The estate has 54 hectares, with 45 hectares of that in vine. And by now, I believe about a third of that is actually completely organic, although at the stage that this was made in 2019, they would have been going through conversion to organic. And the fruit for this wine comes from the oldest blocks in the northeast corner of the estate. The three clones used are the Mendoza clone, clone 95 and clone 548. The fruit is whole bunch pressed to give clean juice to start with. It's then allowed to settle overnight before being run off into barrel for fermentation to start. Now the majority of the fermentations here are done using the indigenous yeasts that are either already present in the winery or have made their way into the winery on the fruit. They do, however, say that they will inoculate a small portion of the harvest just to give them some extra blending options in terms of the fruit character that certain yeasts can create. I'm not given any detail as to the kind of oak used. I would imagine it's French. I should imagine a portion is new, but as I say, that detail isn't given. And I'm also not told how long the wine spends in barrel, but they do say there's an extended period of lees aging during the barrel aging. So let's have a look at the wine and see what we make of it, shall we? There's a vibrant medium to deep yellow colour there. The wine has 13.5% alcohol. As I swirl it, it is forming tears on the glass, but there's nothing substantial there. So let's see what we make of the aroma, shall we? There's a real minerality to those aromas, and I think that's largely coming from fermentation, from the fermentation aromas. There's quite a sort of a sulfidic, flinty, struck match, gunpowder, all those sort of notes there. Under that, there's a creamy note coming from presumably from flavours produced by malolactic conversion and lees aging. And behind that still, there's a sort of a peachy touch, a little bit of stone fruit, but really the aromas are dominated by this, you know, quite sulphurous note. So let's have a taste. The palate is beautifully balanced and clean. The acidity is fresh. There's a delicate milkiness. There are some lovely sort of citric notes coming at the back there. They're not coming through as harsh. Everything is just so rounded and so smooth. The wine's a mid-weight. There's a little bit of, it feels like warmth on the mid-palate, but given that this is only 13.5% alcohol, I don't think it's alcohol warmth. I think that's actually some of the spiciness coming through from the oak. The roundness and the smoothness that's derived from the leesiness is beautifully paired to peach and pear fruit that is not, you know, particularly ebullient. It's sitting there elegantly. The oak notes, as I said, there's a texture of oak, there's a richness of oak, but I'm not particularly getting sort of cedriness, so perhaps there's not that much new oak. That would make some sense. There's perhaps an underlying touch of vanilla, but that's just a delicate note, helping to add a little bit of roundness there. The finish is beautifully fresh. I suspect the acidity is actually higher than it seems, because it's not harsh and acidic at all, but there is a clean freshness goes right through the wine to the finish. The wine's persistent, it's balanced. I suspect it would probably age for another 2 or 3 years quite happily, but it's a very nice point at the moment. It's really, I think, offering some lovely drinking. The long flavours are delicate, and the finish is just starting to show some little touches of exotic spices. There's a hint of ginger, there's touches of nutmeg and cinnamon, but they're just very delicate. They're sitting behind sort of slightly creamy notes that are beautifully married to the lovely peachy notes of the fruit. And again, on the finish, you've just got some very slight touches of that minerality, those sort of sulphury gunpowder notes, but they've really pulled back after being so apparent on the nose. They're just adding a little bit of complexity to the finish here. So wonderfully delicate and elegant wine. Now, I looked at the aggregated critic score that we have for this wine, and it actually is not much of an aggregation, because it simply comprises of one score, and that was one score of 94. Which seems relatively high, but actually in terms of this wine's elegance, I think I can see what prompted the reviewer to give that score. There's an elegance and a refinement to this wine that shows a sort of a self-confidence in the winemaking that's very attractive. I'm not particularly sure the wine will age for a long time, but I do think it's drinking really nicely at the moment. So thank you so much for joining us for the tasting. I do hope you've enjoyed it. If you have, we'd be very grateful if you press the like button. That would be fantastic. If you've watched these videos and you enjoy them, do please subscribe. It would be fantastic to have your support. If you have any comments you want to leave, please pop those in the comments box below. We'd love to hear your feedback on the wines we're looking at, the tastings we're doing, or anything else that relates to that. If you have friends you think might like to watch the video, do please feel free to share it with them. I'd very much appreciate that. I will of course leave a link in the notes below to the page on the Wine Searcher website, giving details of the pricing, the availability of this wine, and also with the sort of tabs taking you through to the critics notes, any awards the wine's received, any background information we have on that, and a price history there. So plenty of information there for you. Thanks again for joining us, and I do hope you'll manage to take some time and come and join us for another tasting in the very near future. Anyway, bye for now.